Well, hello, free people of the Rocky Mountain region, and welcome to this Free State Colorado video. Today, I'm joined by Jessica Fenske. Jessica is an outspoken advocate for liberty on her X channel, Forest Mommy. Well, Jessica, I hope you are well, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on, Brandon.
Well, Jessica, you've been so outspoken about a lot of liberty issues, but particularly this government subsidized and taxpayer funded illegal immigration schemes that we've been seeing here in Colorado. Of course, it's blown up nationally. This whole story about Aurora is making headlines across the world, believe it or not. And we want to dig in. There's been a lot of great work so far on some different social media channels and some different investigations in terms of seeing how this is happening. Where's this money coming from? Who's involved? Who's the behind the scenes players in a lot of this? So that's what we're going to do today is kind of delve into some of this taxpayer and NGO funded human trafficking and forced migration.
All right, here we go. How mad am I gonna get?
Well, it's definitely worth getting mad over. And I'm really excited to share this with you, Jessica, because you haven't seen these slides before. So I'd love to hear your perspective, hear what you think. And the viewers at home can kind of follow along with you, seeing this information for maybe the first time.
It will be. I mean, I have a general idea of what's been going on, but like I'm so thankful that you dug into it because it's so convoluted and there's so many layers and it's hard to track. So thank you and can't wait.
Definitely. Well, definitely, it's Free State Colorado, so I focused really on the Colorado aspects to it. Of course, there's some bigger stories out there of this human trafficking from international organizations, international NGOs. Like, how did these people get to Colorado in the first place? Those are some big questions. But really, what I want to do is focus on what's happening here once they get here.
Yeah.
So, it's no surprise, it's no shocker. It's not hard to find that this massive influx of illegal immigration in recent years is facilitated by governments and NGOs. I think that's kind of the basis starting point of our conversation tonight. And I don't think it's a surprise to people out there. Do you think people understand that?
Understand what's going on with the money and the I don't think they do. And if they do, they think of it as that the government's doing it, it's legal and it's allowed, which I mean, technically it is because they're doing it, but I don't think people understand quite what's going on. No.
Right. I mean, immigration's a normal thing, but really this big surge of illegal immigration that we've seen in recent years, it's totally facilitated by these NGOs, by this government agencies. I mean, it's absolutely wild because it's like they're breaking the law, but they're doing it with the government's doing it. So it's like, yeah, of course it's still illegal, but they say, well, if the government's doing it, then how can it be illegal, right?
Yeah, and there's been people who've like gone down to the border. Owen Schroyer had a great video on this right after he got out of jail. And he was like they're being led from coming through holes in the border or wherever and being put on buses. And then, which I know they would have to take them somewhere, but they're not taking them back or they're being transported around America. And he was just sitting there like, the border patrol and people with guns and uniforms are doing it. So is it legal? That's a more philosophical question, I suppose.
Well, let's start with this article here. This, of course, was one of the biggest stories here recently with what's going on in Aurora. There's a lot of videos we saw on there. There's this Christopher F. Rufo and Christina Buttons. They did a lot of videos, but really, people, if you're on X or Instagram, wherever, you probably saw these videos. But this is kind of that article that a lot of it was based on. So I kind of wanted, as the first step, kind of our first dig into this rabbit hole is looking at this article, this chaos in Aurora, how the federal government subsidized the migrant madness in suburban Colorado. So only from September 10th, 2024. So this is one of the first links they have in the article is that Denver estimates $3 million was spent so far on the migrant crisis as daily arrivals continue. Now it's kind of slowed down recently. It's still in the news, of course, but I mean, you got to remember this was back in 2022 when this article was. I mean, thousands and thousands of people kept coming to Colorado like weekly. It was absolutely insane. So just that month of December 2022, they say 3,000 migrants arrived, 770 staying in shelters. So it was really, really tough to find a place for all these people to go. Now, the reason they bring this up in the article here is because they really tie it into this American Rescue Plan Act. So, of course, that's, you got to think COVID relief money that was set aside. And turns out a lot of it was used for illegal immigration. I'm sure you're shocked at that.
Not shocked at all. And all these plans and acts, they always got to use up all the money. And if they have to be doing certain things to receive the money, like the COVID money, I've been to plenty of city county meetings where they're like, well, that money's going to be drying up, so we need to be, it's just it never ends.
It never ends. So this article from the Denver Post back then shows $2.5 million of this federal money coming into Colorado specifically for the migrant issue. Originally COVID relief money, but of course they'll use it wherever they want. The next article that they reference, or next link that they reference in that article that I thought was interesting was from January of 2023. So you can kind of see where this money is going. So, Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management in Colorado. This is a migrant support grant application available. The grant agreements to qualified providers are not to exceed $1.7 million per entity. Holy crap. And of course, it's from that American Rescue Plan Act. So lots of money pouring into Colorado. They're giving out these grants. And I mean, you can only guess who's going to get this grant.
Yeah.
So then the Colorado Sun has an article here kind of related to that. Denver restores public services, creates asylum-seeker job program, as expected $90 million in migrant aid. So this is one of the big things that they talked about in that City Journal article was these two nonprofits. These are the two of the ones they're pointing the biggest fingers to, and we'll dig into them a little bit. Vive Wellness and Papagayo, helping the city house more than 8,000 migrants in apartments with about 2,000 leases. I mean, that's absolutely wild.
Yeah, if you are an apartment complex person, that's great business, really. So you have this government money coming in for rent or to help them get placed for at least a handful of months. Why, of course, you'd jump on board with that.
Right? You're getting this rent subsidized by taxpayers and the government. Of course, you're going to take that money.
Yeah.
So here's an article from that City Journal article here. Going back to that, it shows, nevertheless, the city flooded those two groups with cash. According to public records, between 23 and 24, Vive Wellness and Papagayo received $4.8 million and $774,000 respectively. Much of this funding came from the Migrant Support Grant, which was funded by this ARPA. Then in 2024, Vive secured an extra $10.4 million across three contracts, while Papagayo received $2.9 million from a single contract to serve migrants. I mean, absolutely crazy how much money that they're bringing in to these groups. I mean, it's definitely, it sounds like it's some people are making some good money off it.
Yeah, more and most average people would read that and think, well, that all that money is going towards it's all going towards, helping people and it's helping people to become better. But we find time and time again that's not the case. The money gets wasted, it goes through another bunch of hands, and it never even makes it to where it needs to go.
Well, 110%. Some people are making big out of it. So I want to jump back into that actual article here, which you can find all these links at freestatecolorado.com. But what's really interesting, I think, in this City Journal piece is they talk about how these two NGOs were working with landlords to place the migrants in housing units to subsidize the rent. We just talked about that. But they're saying Papagayo worked with CBZ Management, which is the property company that operates those three apartments at the center of the controversy. So the Edge of Lowry, Whispering Pines, and Fitzsimmons Place, also known as Aspen Grove. So this article is saying that basically those NGOs are working directly with this property management company to funnel in these Venezuelan immigrants and basically paying them off this COVID relief money.
Yeah, and it's hard with with the number of people they were placing and putting in. There's no way that between their organization and the landlords, they were paying the landlords, but I know people probably moved and left, and they didn't, alert them about it. So there's still money going to the landlords. I've worked in property management before, and the like Section 8 checks of they would sometimes direct deposit it into there, but the people moved, and then you got to go through all this trouble because it's the government to like give them their money back. And yeah, it's just I can only imagine the mess it was with people who are immigrants from another country who are gonna they may stay and like be doing the path that these people are helping them do, or they're gonna go do whatever. They may have had family here already or whatever. So there was no way they were able to keep track of all that.
Oh yeah, nearly impossible to keep track of it all. This article goes on to say that they spoke with an employee from this management company anonymously, and basically he described it that this NGO would contact this regional property manager who would match them up to apartments. Which, like you were saying, no surprise there, right? I mean, these people want the money, especially if it's government guaranteed money. They're going to take those checks. So supposedly, Papagayo arranged hundreds of contracts with the property manager. The NGO provided up to 2 months of rental assistance, as many migrants did not have or were unable to open bank accounts. Within 6 months, according to the employee, approximately 80% of the residents of these buildings were Venezuelan migrants. Then the building started seeing this gang activity and violence. So, I mean, what do you expect is going to happen, right? You bring in all these people who really don't have connections to the community. It's nearly impossible for them to get a job. I mean, eventually, once that government money runs out, you're going to start running into trouble, right?
Yeah, and I think they had already the earlier in the years before they were placing them in these, they were in hotels out in Aurora. And then eventually that whatever fund was specifically for that got cut off. So then they had to get this funding, they had to get this type of thing going. It's of course that yeah. But like
Well,
the hotel's gonna say no.
right. The hotel's not going to say no. The city of Denver's bought some hotels to try and house some of these people. And so it's kind of interesting to see, this we're kind of rounding out the story of what we're seeing in Aurora with these different apartment buildings, where if they were working directly with these NGOs to fill these places up with some of these migrants who really didn't have hope for a job or an opportunity. I mean, what are they going to do, right? When the money runs out, they're stuck there. Some criminal organizations can prey upon them. I mean, it's really a bad situation.
Yeah, it's taking advantage of people, and some people made money off of it, and they're the ones not living in these apartments that are getting run down and having violence.
Definitely. So recommend people check out that City Journal article for what we've covered so far. Christopher Rufo on X kind of elaborated with this letter. They obtained the confidential report, which alleges, according to witness interviews, that the apartment saw a string of crimes, including trespassing, assault, extortion, drug use, illegal firearm possession, human trafficking, and sexual abuse. So, if this all is true, then it's clear that it was government funded human trafficking and criminal organizations, really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, some people have been arguing that it's not human trafficking because the government's doing it, but I don't see how if somebody's making money, I guess their aspect is the people voluntarily wanted to come, but if you're promising them something and they're not going to get it, that's coercion. So I don't, that's the same thing. It's just different.
Right. It's a coercion and it's lies. It's of course all the problems that government causes every day here, bringing all these people in. So interesting to see that this is from August 9th. This letter here where they're asking for confidential treatment, basically saying that the building management was had evidence of all these problems: sexual abuse of minors, extortion, human trafficking, assaults, battery, all this kind of stuff, and I'm really unable to do anything about it because it's kind of almost like this like taxpayer funded NGO controlled organization, right?
Yeah, and people are it's so big. It's so huge and so big. How can we do anything about it? Even like I said, letting people know, people just want to ignore it or say it's okay. And it's a placement program. Use different words. And I think people in their mind, they think, yeah, America is the place you would come to make a better life. But that's not what's happening. This isn't regular immigration. This is people literally being picked up and then put somewhere with menial help, but the people who are putting them and moving them, they're making money. They're doing fine. It's just I don't know how you get around it calling it anything other than human trafficking. But we can't do anything about it really. But we can, like you're doing right now, get it out there.
Well, no, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, to interrupt you there, but it's a great point that like this is like unnatural immigration, right? And be one thing if these people got themselves here, but it's like it's only because of these taxpayer money, these government subsidies, these NGOs which are getting taxpayer money. It's the only reason that this is happening, why we're in such a crisis as it is. It's not this naturally occurring thing as we saw for hundreds of years over America's history, right?
Yeah, and if you and I went down to the border and just saw people walking that we knew were immigrants who came over and we picked them up and like dropped them off somewhere, it would not be allowed. I mean, who knows if we get caught, but if we got caught, we get in big trouble. But it'd probably be more humane than what's going on now.
Right. Right. So that was kind of the first rabbit hole, was kind of what we've already seen. A lot of this information's out there. But let's dig a little bit deeper now. Let's go into some of the 2024 legislation. I mean, this is recent stuff, people. I mean, these are bills that and laws that were signed by our governor, Jared Polis, just months ago. So this is one of the most controversial bills, I'd say, Senate Bill 182. Uh, changing the Colorado Road and Community Safety Act for individuals who are not lawfully present in the United States, and making it easier for them to get a driver's license. So you see some of our favorite people down there, like Tim Hernandez, Julie Gonzalez, and I'm trying to be sarcastic. They're not anybody's favorite people for sure.
No, they're terrible people. You keep seeing their names by a lot of terrible things.
So before, when this bill was passed, there was a lot of need, they said, for, if you filed an income tax return in Colorado, if you can show that you've been a resident for 2 years, maybe you're not here illegally, but you're working, you've been doing these a part of the community for 2 years, paying your taxes, then yeah, let's give you a driver's license. That was the original law. Now, in 2024, with what changed, they basically removed the income tax requirement. So there's no proof that they paid any taxes here. They removed the 2-year residency requirement, remove the documented social security number or individual taxpayer identification number, and they expanded the list of acceptable identification to basically being, it doesn't list it here, but it does if you read that fiscal note. You can have an expired passport from 10 years ago from Venezuela, for example, and bring it here to Colorado. That's your only proof of who you are, and they'll give you a driver's license.
Insanity. I was just reading the rest of it too. Any combinations, documents issued by an agency. So that means the people like who are putting them through the process centers just give them some ID with whatever name they're told, probably. And so it's literally just poof out of nowhere, and then they can get a driver's license.
Yeah, I mean, you have to wonder, they're incentivizing these people coming here illegally, 100%, and they're actually changing our laws to facilitate this and to make it easier, especially with even
And make
even
it
with all this
legal.
crime,
Make it
right?
legal. Sorry, I didn't mean to
De
interrupt
facto,
you.
de facto legal. No, 100%, please. So, of course, friend Carrie Muma posted this on X or a little bit ago. Definitely got a lot of traction. Very, very much went viral. This is from Jefferson County, Colorado. This is a voter registration notice. It says, "Congratulations, you are registered to vote in Jefferson County. You were registered during your recent DMV visit. You have 3 options. Do nothing. You remain registered to vote as an unaffiliated and get your ballot in the mail. You can affiliate with a political party, or you can decline to be registered, because voting is for U.S. citizens only. Decline if you're not eligible, do not want to be registered, then sign and date below."
I'm
So, I
sure
mean, Jessica,
everybody is going to get these notices in the mail and return them. That's not a legal citizen.
right, exactly. I mean, to put the to make it where they have to, if they just automatically register them and then they have to opt out, seems pretty ridiculous, because for one, if these people are here illegally, do we really expect them to sign a document saying they are here illegally and then sending it into the county government? I mean, why would they do that?
Yeah, and like I said, they were probably moving around a lot. We saw the safety apartments. They've come and gone, I'm sure, which we're all humans and you need to survive and stuff. But like, they're not going to be getting these letters and they're not going to be signing them. This is like a marketing trick to do something like for sales and stuff. What you do is you send something where you need correspondence. Like everyone tries this trick and they're literally doing it.
Right? Like, we're going to sign you up. You got to have to opt out if you don't want to receive this. It
Yeah.
used to be a CD every month back in the day,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it's if they're really just registering people to vote as soon as they get their driver's license, and they make it easier for people who are here illegally to get driver's license, I mean, you put two and two together, it doesn't seem like a recipe for success.
Yeah, but we're called, we're bad names for noticing this stuff, we're bigoted, I guess we could say that.
Well, it gets better than that, because we got House Bill 1280 here. This was another bill I think kind of flew under the radar during the legislative session, but they created this Welcome, Reception, and Integration Grant Program. So they created this grant program for community-based organizations to provide appropriate services for migrants who are within 1 year of arrival in the United States, and then making an appropriation. So, of course, we see Lorena Garcia, Rhonda Fields, Lisa Cutter, Elizabeth
Alaska
Valesko
too.
again. So
And
what is
she's,
this? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't know, not to like jump ahead or anything, but are you going to talk about that bill that letter that 500 elected people sent in to the federal government this past week?
I wasn't planning on it. Are any of these people on there?
Velasco and Fields and Shauna Ambrose from Arvada, who won against District 2. All these people, a whole list of them is on there. And they basically they're Mike Johnson, they're begging the federal government to bring 2.5 million more people over. That's it's
Wow.
what it, but it's just like a letter. But yeah, I'll make sure to get that too, so you can read it. Someone did a deep dive on it and named there's people from all 50 states that signed, and the list from Colorado Progressive was that long that are all signed in on it because they're all part of the machine.
Of course, it's totally an agenda. It's a machine. It's happening with our tax dollars. So here's that bill, just looking at the legislation. So this is the fiscal note. So this is a $2.1 million grant. At least they put in there at least a $2.1 million grant of our tax money is going to this community-based organization. Now, Jessica, who do you think is going to get this money? Do you think it's going to be any politically connected nonprofits, which we're about to dive into? Do you think it's going to be anybody that maybe just some familiar names or organizations that are already getting millions of dollars in taxpayer money for this exact issue?
Yeah, that have been proven. The numbers have proven that the funding they've already been gotten has never worked, and I'm sure they're just going to be getting more money.
Right? I mean, it's crazy. This is, in my mind, this is how an example of how politics really works. You get these people elected, you get some extremists and some people in there like Lorena Garcia, for example. She gets a bill, sponsors a bill to get money sent back to these nonprofits and these other connected people who helped get her elected in the first place. I mean, it's a way for them to show their humanitarian side, quote unquote, pretend that they're trying to serve the community, but really just funnel money back to these organizations that they're so connected to.
Completely true. And they all know someone there, or their husbands work at these nonprofits, or someone from their family. It's really interesting how it's all connected like that.
Oh, it's very intertwined, as we'll just see. So that's one of the big bills.
Oh, you muted. You muted, sorry.
So where's that money going to go, right? So where's this money going to end up? This $2.1 million. If you read the summary of the legislation, it establishes the statewide welcome reception and integration grant program in the Department of Labor and Employment. So that's where the money's going to go. Now, it
Hmm.
turns out that the CDLE already has an organization that this money's going to slide right into. So here's where we start digging a little bit deeper. So the CDLE, Department of Labor, there has the Office of New Americans. So the Office of New Americans was established in 2021. It's the point of contact for state agencies, private sector organizations, and the public to advance the integration and inclusion of immigrants and refugees in Colorado communities. So you got refugees, people seeking asylum, special immigrant visa holders, victims of trafficking, the DACA recipients, other immigrants, aspiring citizens, the whole works here. So basically, there's a state-funded organization that now is going to get a $2.1 million injection into their budget for furthering their mission here.
Ugh. I
So
don't know what to say at the time.
so currently where they're at, they got four full-time employees, permanent full-time employees here. What's interesting, they have a director, program assistant, benefit recovery fund manager. The list goes on. What's interesting is there's really only three positions that are funded ongoing. You can see the migrant integration manager and the migrant grant specialist are both from that ARPA funding, which we just saw, that American Recovery Act funding there. And same with the global talent administrator. So that money's going to dry up. And then up until next year, they get this administrator who's from private funding, which we're going to dig into a little bit, and this VC at ESL manager. So it's a big staff. Really, only two of them are three of them are sustainable, and the rest are either coming from federal government funds or this private funding. So here's some of their money.
I'm
Here's
assuming
where
you got their names, right? Are we gonna go over their names?
we're going to go into the money part of it here.
Okay.
So here's some of this money. This is kind of their budget from their website here. So they say in 2023 they only got $250,000. Their request for the fiscal year 24 through 25 is $6.4 million in federal funds. So I mean, I don't know where all this money's coming from. I'm sure that's, part of what our Congress critters are doing up in Washington, and the senators making sure they can get this money sent down here. But what I wanted to show is just how interesting it is that for 23 and 24, they've really only had, $488,000. $500,000 is really the only money that they've received through the legislative process, through the legislative budget process. What's interesting here, now here's another article about this group. So the main head of it is this lady here, Danielle Skirvin. Um, she's kind of the head honcho down there. She was hired only recently. She's been involved in a lot of work down there. I'll highlight her here. She's been involved in the immigration issue for a long time, worked in Washington, D.C., and is now here in Colorado. One interesting thing, this article is from February of this year. She says there was a $500,000 private donation they received. So it's very interesting. They're getting this money from the taxpayers. They're getting this money from the Colorado taxpayers. They're getting money from the federal government. And then there's all these other forces at play, these nonprofits, these other private donors, and these other people who are really facilitating this entire mission that they have. I mean, how nice would it be, Jessica, to get a $500,000 private donation to your organization, right?
Yeah, it'd be great.
I mean, if effectively doubling their budget, and they only had less than $500,000 from federal funds and the state government this year, and it's just doubling their budget, which really is the only explanation of why they can do what they do, as we'll see. So where have they spent their money? So we saw some of where their money, the recorded money, right? We know how much they're getting from the government in Colorado or how much they're getting from the feds. We have just a hint of what they're getting from private forces. Well, we know how much they spend, right? We can look at the TOPS expenses on the Colorado website and see how much they spent. So this is, I started looking up where their money's going. So they spent, I know it's hard to see, but just this year alone, this is from January to April of this year, this one office, this Office of New Americans in the Department of Labor, has spent $2.4 million to AidKit. And AidKit helps governments and nonprofits build fast, accessible, and fraud resilient cash aid and benefit programs at scale. So this is basically $2.4 million of money, not necessarily coming from the taxpayers. We don't know where it's coming from, paid toward this organization that's basically creating these cash funds, cash aid funds to give to these migrant people.
So it's like another kind of like a SNAP office or like a WIC, right? But specifically for this group of people that they have deemed the immigrants of or the newcomers.
Right. Yeah. This AidKit is just a private company. They work with governments, nonprofits to figure out how to get people money to create like those EBT cards or SNAP cards or something like that, WIC money, so that they can get, a debit card or something like that, get the cash doled out to them and they can go spend it to pay for their living expenses to keep them, on their feet. But I thought it was so interesting that we don't necessarily know where all this money is coming from. You have $500,000 of money they've received, and then here's $2.4 million coming out of that office just for cash aid funds. So I mean, there's definitely more players here that are not really transparent to the public. And then where did some of their other money go? Well, they've also spent almost $200,000 to one organization in particular. We're going to look at the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network. So part of OAM, the Office of New Americans, ONA's mission is to provide this immigration legal defense fund. And we're going to see this in the state as we are and also in Denver later. But basically, there's a organization, a law firm, this Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, that's getting taxpayer money to basically represent immigrants in court to help keep them here in the country. So another $200,000. So they spend a lot of money and we don't know where they're getting it all from.
And does it say what is it specific for charges or is it specifically government giving government money to fight ICE, which is government? Is that what this is?
It's
Or
a
is it
grant. It's a grant to non-governmental organizations so that they can provide legal defense to people here illegally. So yes, they're basically using taxpayer money and money from this is a government agency using money from taxpayers and nonprofits and other private individuals to basically provide legal defense for people in the country illegally so that they can fight against the federal government in court or maybe even some other government in court. I mean, it's government fighting government.
it's that the meme with the Spider-Man guy, it's all the same.
So Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, they're a big player. It turns out we'll see their name pop up again. Like I said, they've got nearly $200,000 this year. This is their managing attorney, Stephanie Aritz. Now, what's interesting is she is on the board of directors, been on there since 2015, but she's also part of the Rose Community Foundation nonprofit endowment cohort, which we're going to take a look at. But apparently, she represents people for free based on this immigration issue. But her organization's getting big amounts, big checks from government agencies.
Hmm.
So we'll see her name pop up again, but let's jump over some other, which kind of, and actually that kind of leads us into more non-governmental organizations. As we saw in there, the Rose Community Foundation is something I really want to talk about in this video. Here's an article from the Durango Herald from November of 2023. Thousands of Venezuelan migrants in Denver want to work but can't afford the $545 federal application fee. So here comes Rose Community Foundation to the rescue. So we just saw that office just earlier this year in February, the Office of New Americans received a $500,000 private donation. Well, who else received an anonymous $500,000 donation within months of that? And that's the
Hmm.
Rose Community Foundation. And so they got this $500,000 as an anonymous gift to set up legal clinics where migrants can fill out application to receive financial assistance. So I just thought it was interesting. Unfortunately, we don't know where this money is coming from, but you're talking over $1 million going to different organizations working on this immigration issue to bring these people here into Colorado.
Yeah, that is interesting.
So the Rose Community Foundation is a name that people might be familiar with just because they're so big. They have this thing called the Newcomers Fund, and they brag that since 2022, over 40,000 people have arrived in the greater Denver region after traveling from South and Central America, and they've helped them out. They're one of the big nonprofits at this big foundation that has helped fund a lot of this integration efforts with all these immigrants coming in. So this is a name we definitely want to know here in Colorado. These are big players, so let's dig in a little bit into the Rose Community Foundation. Here's some of the money they've given out. So some of these names might be familiar to people. There's the Center for Immigrants and Immigration Services, the Catholic Charities, Casa de Paz, Capitol Hill Community Services, some other groups, Denver Rescue Mission. I mean, a lot of groups out there. A lot of them seem pretty innocuous. You do see Papagayo, which was referenced in that previous one. Papagayo was one of the groups that they said was working to get these migrants placed in those apartments, and some others. Some lot of organizations that are involved with. They get a lot of money coming through there.
Yeah, the Vive Wellness as well. Both of those two that were named in that article. Hmm.
Yes, so both of those are getting money from this private organization, this nonprofit, to help facilitate everything we're seeing happen in Aurora.
On top of those other grants they got that you went over earlier.
And then let's see, but Rose Community Foundation, if people have been involved in political work, like you've seen their name pop up because they support all these progressive causes. Like here's just a snapshot of their most recent contributions to different organizations in Tracer. Tracer is the Colorado Secretary of State's website for tracking campaign finance spending, if you don't know. But this Coloradans for Local Communities, that was going to be, from what I understand, it was going to be used to fight against this Initiative 58 and 108, the two big, or 50, excuse me, Initiative 50 and 108, the two big property tax relief bills that are ballot initiatives that got pulled after the special session, which is why they got refunded $53,000 because now they're not on the ballot. So they said, okay, we're going to give the money back. This Coloradans for Local Communities. So you see this Rose Community Foundation is tied into all of this. Freedom to Marry Colorado, protecting reproductive freedom, preschool for all Coloradans, affordable housing, healthy school meals. So I mean, this is all these big ballot initiatives we've seen over the past few years to increase the size of government, take more of our tax money and give it out to special interests. And they're right in the middle of it.
Yes, they are. With a
One, I
lot of
want
money. Well, throwing a lot of money around.
a lot of money. One of the big ones down here. Let me see if I get a better square around it is yes on Amendment B. For people who've been around for a while, in 2020, Amendment B was on the ballot to repeal the Gallagher Amendment, which is why we just had a special session, is because it changed how property taxes are calculated here in Colorado and raised property taxes to an astonishing level. So Rose Community was behind that back then to raise property taxes here in Colorado. They were willing to fight and use their money to fight against property taxes, property tax decrease here this year, and they're just so heavily involved in all these different political issues.
Weird, wild.
Now, what I thought was interesting, they said, well, Rose Community Foundation has been around for a lot. They're really connected. Turns out they're getting money from our government. They're getting money from our state government. Big shocker there. So the Department of Human Services the Office of Economic Security in our Department of Human Services has given them nearly $5.3 million this year alone. That's just this year, in this fiscal year. I mean, you're talking $5.2 million for economic security. And then this organization is working on ballot initiatives. They're working on all these different little pet projects of these politicians. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it always seems to work to make the government bigger and get more money, and it always seems to work in the government's favor, oddly enough.
Oddly enough, right, that these organizations who support politicians when they're running on their campaigns, when they get elected, they support they're pushing these laws through, then they get money from once these laws are passed from like here, the Department of Human Services shelling out $4.2 million to this Rose Community Foundation. I mean, this is all legitimate stuff, but it's most people have no idea that this is going on. That you don't need more evidence to show that this is all taxpayer funded, government subsidized programs that are totally trained to socially engineer our society.
And they say, oh, it goes towards services. It goes towards services. No, that money goes towards campaigning and getting ballot initiatives. And it's just another lie they use. It's for service. That's why I think the average person, again, can't realize it or doesn't realize it because they think whatever money they are aware of that's being spent, they think it's fine. They think it's just, they think it's making it to where it needs to go. But if they only knew, it's so much more. Like it's
It's
crazy.
crazy. I know. So it's interesting because people can say, "Oh, the government's only spending this amount of money on migrant services and this and that," but then they hand out these grants, millions and millions of dollars worth of grants to these private companies or nonprofits, these NGOs, these non-governmental organizations, who then fulfill the agenda of the politicians, and they kind of almost like wash the money through this grant process. So they get the money. And there's a little bit of a paper trail, but it's not exactly clear that this is where the taxpayer money's going. And I feel like that's a way they get away with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, it's like just layers of it. So they're just washing, yeah, like you said, washing it back and forth. They send it to the smaller nonprofit, which does this. Yeah, it's totally, but legal. Apparently.
It's yeah, this is how politics really works. I mean, this is money moving around, taxpayer money coming from our Department of Human Services going to this highly political Rose Community Foundation. What's interesting too is this Rose Community Foundation has given out $2.5 million this year. This is from March of 2024. So I guess this is from last year. This is their kind of year-end report for 2023, excuse me. But in 2023, the Rose Community Foundation awarded $2.5 million to this diverse and dynamic ecosystem of organizations. Now, these are some organizations I think we may have heard of before, right, Jessica?
Yep, Bell Policy Center. Now being headed by our buddy, what's his name? DeGrew.
Chris DeGrew Kennedy, who's one of the
Yeah.
biggest authoritarians down at the state
Oh,
legislature, now just is working for them, gets out of government. But guess what? He probably set up, I'm not saying he did, but he's got to be so connected. He knows what's
allegedly.
going
You
on.
can just say if you just say allegedly, you can get away with saying people do a lot.
Right? Allegedly, he's connected to all this. I mean, he's got to know what's going on. He's the one helping pass these bills down at the legislature, sees the money go to this organization, who then funnels money back to the Bell Policy Center, which does election work that he ends up being a part of. Colorado Coalition for the Homeless, New Era Colorado. That's something I've written about before. They're really at one of those blueprint organizations that both Steve Fenberg, Senate President, Joe Neguse, current Senate District or Congress District 2 representative, serving in Congress, was involved. Brittany Pedersen, who's now congressperson for Congressional District 7, worked for them. Ian Silverio is attached to them. So I mean, it's this total web, this total interconnected web of people who are all at the center of this, and they're figuring out ways to get taxpayer money funneled through these different organizations to support their livelihood. I mean, that this is why the Democrats, why these people can win for years and years to come, because they've set up this infrastructure to live off taxpayer funds, to promote their own little organizations, and then create this self-perpetuating cycle.
But Brandon, I'm always told that only in capitalism and the free market would people help their buddies or help their family or be nepotistic, and that the government is what makes it fair.
Right. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. If only, right? I know that's a good point, Jessica. I mean, it's like so many of these people who complain about, monopolies or these evil capitalists or these big business owners colluding with each other. It's like, well, the government's where it happens 99% of the time. I mean, it's not like you're going to get the government to control all these private businesses. Well, they're just going to do stuff like this where they're going to bring money in, shuffle it around, give it to their little allies, and push their agenda and try and hide it from the public.
Yeah, I mean, people they could say a small company like the father hands it down to their son, and that's the worst thing in the world for a family to take over the family business. But this stuff is okay. It's just it's so hypocritical to me.
Well, in Colorado Ceasefire Legislative Action, they're one of these anti-gun groups that are down at the state legislature. I wrote an article about them, I think it was a year ago. They're actually also getting taxpayer money from this this Office of Gun Safety or whatever it is, that's now in our public health department. They're getting taxpayer money and they work on campaigns all the time and work on lobbying legislators for their bills. And it's like all these people are getting taxpayer money or are highly connected to these really powerful NGOs like Rose Community Foundation here.
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy.
So, who is on the board? Who is the board of the Rose Community Foundation? Well, earlier this year, they have a new board member. This is Marty Awad. She is the head of it there. She's been involved in a lot of different things. And I thought it was so interesting because she's a senior vice president at Wealth Enhancement Group, which I never heard of them before, but they seem like they got a lot of money flowing around. She's a founding partner at Cardin Capital Partners, was a vice president of wealth management advisor at Bank of America for nearly 10 years, vice president and private wealth advisor at UBS, another big organization out there in New York, and a vice president of Bank of America. So, I mean, this is the person who's now chairing this Rose Community Foundation, where we're seeing make all of these massive connections to engineer our society in their direction. I mean, it's absolutely wild.
Oh yeah, and College Invest too. That was more government money for college savings fund. I remember that. I did temp work for them.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's wild. She's been on the Metropolitan State University of Denver Foundation. She's worked with these massive banks, and now she's overseeing this organization that has a lot of money, and they're handing it out to these politically connected organizations here in Colorado. So has she ever donated? Was a question I thought. And she has, not recently, but since 2021 was her most recent donation. Pretty small dollar amounts, but she's definitely showing up at some of these events or participating. So Denver students, families, and teachers united for excellent schools. You can imagine what that was for, what that committee was for. Daphne Michelson Janae, definitely a left-wing authoritarian, Healthier Colorado, Democrats for Education Reform. I mean, so you can see how she's given money over the past 10 years, and it kind of gives you a picture of her political leanings for sure.
Yeah.
So it's no surprise that there's this extremely wealthy organization out there headed by this lady to kind of move money around Colorado. Let's talk about another NGO here that's in.
Oh, can I add something about Rose Foundation really quick? That Papayo or Vive Wellness, those two companies, the CEOs from each of them won awards they won some award that's given out through the Rose Community Foundation. Yeah, the CEOs, Yoli Casas and the other one, it's something Suarez. They're Venezuelan. The one lady went to CU Boulder, it sounds like, but that wow, they won an award for getting money and spending money. Like it's
Of
so
course, yeah, they wrote the grants probably and they set up this little
yeah.
scheme to, allegedly move all these
It was
immigrants
it was a
into.
leadership award. So I bet they're like, oh, these people helped us get the most money, figured out how to place the most immigrants. I'm sure under
Right, they were able
20.
to flood these apartment buildings with all these immigrants and set up this bad situation that's making international headlines now. Let's give them an award.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's this non-governmental organization with huge government ties getting involved in all of these different organizations that we're seeing, granting money, playing with our ballot measures, and getting $5 million from the state government. I mean, it's absolutely wild to see how this whole system works. But let's talk about this East Colfax Community Collective. So there was a lot of talk about them. So, if you may remember, this is back on September 3rd, after all this outcry about these Venezuelan gangs, there was a little rally held, and good left-wing apologist Chase Woodruff tweeted here: tenants at an Aurora apartment complex thrust into the national spotlight by claims of a gang takeover are holding a press conference, disrupting much of the narrative that has been spread by the far right, placing blame for longstanding issues on an absentee landlord. So that was the narrative. The spontaneous, these tenants just decided to have their own little press conference and get people out there and start talking about it. But let's dig a little bit into that press conference here. So there was some word that the East Colfax Community Collective was involved. So who are they? Well, I think you posted one of these pictures, Jessica, and I know you're posting them around, but this is screenshots from that little rally there. Landlord accountability, not building condemnation, stop lying, there aren't gangs. People are commenting, I'm sure, who told them to write all these signs and put them out
I
that
know
way.
if I had come all the way up to Denver from Venezuela, I know I would be writing signs about the landlord. After I just fled a country where the landlord made me flee a country. I would care about a landlord in America. Ugh,
Right,
so weak.
right. And then, so there were some screenshots taken. I think Colorado based was one of them, kind of pointing out some of the members of the crowd were part of this East Colfax Community Collective. It's relatively easy to track down. But one person that popped up here that we saw earlier this year, I wanted to bring up, and that's this lady in the orange here with the blonde lady in the orange. You may remember her from earlier this year, which we'll get into in. Well, I guess we can jump over to her real quick. This is House Keys Action Network Denver. That's her organization that she's a part of. There are so many of these organizations out there. It's crazy. And they're all getting this money from these nonprofits, all for these same issues. So this lady who was there at this rally, she was the one back in May of this year saying that migrants were issuing this list of 13 demands that must be met before they'll leave the street encampment for shelter. They want better food, work permits, and she was this de facto spokesperson who just kind of showed up and was speaking to the media about it. So this is the same lady popping up. She's getting paid to do this. This is part of her organization that she's a part of. So I mean, you want to talk about how manufactured this is? Let's go back. There she is, right there in the middle, popping up in these multiple different events, as well as other people in the crowd who are associated with these organizations.
I think a handful of weeks before when this story kind of first broke before it turned into this, they did another rally because they're getting evicted out of a different people are getting evicted, I think, out of one of the buildings. And specifically hands showed up. I'm sure it was all the same people, but I'm glad you brought that up because I remember I was like, oh, they did another one and Do Better Denver had mentioned the name Hand. So I'm glad I got that now. And they obviously work together with the community collective.
And we'll dig into a little bit on hands. I mean, this is kind of a tangled web here, but just sticking with that East Colfax Community Collective, this was a screenshot, and I know Based Coloradan, yeah, had shared this. But again, all these links will be at freestatecolorado.com, but you can see where their money came from. So this is their 2023 financials, where their money's coming from. So you got the Denver Foundation, which I'm going to get into, $200,000. I mean, this isn't chump change, folks. The city of Aurora gave them 65,000. East City of Denver, 400,000. Colorado Trust, some different other trusts, and these different groups out there. Mikasa Resource Center, which we saw previously getting money from the Rose Foundation. So it's like a lot of these same names keep popping up. And then the East Colfax Mint Income got some money from the Colorado Health Foundation, Gary Community Ventures, 250,000, and Colorado Trust for 250,000. So it's like this money just keeps cycling through a lot of these different organizations that are popping up at these different events.
Only when like they just showed up that day and that was it. Did their little thing and then they left and like that was it.
Right. They got their media story. They got out of it. They're, going around there. Let's look at this Gary Community Ventures. So Gary Community Ventures, which gave this Colfax Collective $200,000, what was it, $250,000? Sorry to keep jumping back there. But this is a screenshot from my review of the 2020 election, to go to the little throwback here. But Gary Community Investments, the same group that's helping to fund this East Colfax Collective, spent $1.2 million to repeal Gallagher Amendment B again. So we're going back to the Rose community. They're all doing the same projects. They're all working on these same initiatives. And guess what? Back then, Gary Community Investments was headed by Mike Johnston. Mike Johnston was the head of this organization back then. Of course, they're popping up all over. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to see all these connections and how tied together all these people are.
It's what can we even do except for laugh at it? It's just like you said, they have built this web and it's clever. They're clever.
Well, it's this one agenda being funded from different sources, and there's a taxpayer component to it. There's these private nonprofits component to it, and they're all working to the same agenda together, hand in hand. So, it's easy to talk about like what the government does, what the politicians do, but it's only half the story. The other half is all these NGOs, these nonprofits who are finding ways to get the taxpayer money, then supporting their candidates, supporting their initiatives, their ideas, and trying to totally manage society in their direction.
Yep.
So here's that hand again. As we saw, I got a screenshot from their website down there where they talked about the money that they brought in. And they said, thank you to the Buck Foundation, the Denver Foundation. We're seeing them pop up again. Matt Wright, Max Appeal for the initial startup funding that made it possible to reimburse every homeless contributor during our survey project. So the Denver Foundation, I wanted to see what they were about because we've seen their name pop up once or twice here. So looking at their financials, they have of 2023, they have $1.2 billion in assets. I mean, it's not chump change. That's a lot of money. I mean, it's absolutely crazy how much money. Now, a lot of it's tied up in like, investments. It's not like they have cash on hand of that amount of money, but they do have enough cash on hand to dole out $20 million in grants during last year in 2023.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So this is a
That's
big time player.
billion. That means there has to be billionaires involved.
These are big time
And
players that nobody talks about.
yeah.
So in June of this year, they have a little press release out there of the $2.3 million they gave in community grants. Let's see who some of those people are. So they did give, here's a check for $750,000 that the city of Denver gave to the Denver Foundation. So not only is the Denver Foundation funding these nonprofits, but they're getting a big checks cut to them from our city of Denver government as well. So that's 750 grand from February, $21,000 in March, and $15,000 in March. That's just this year so far of how much the Denver city government, so Denver taxpayers, are paying the Denver Foundation, which is then funding these little not NGOs to go around and host little events and get involved and politicize different
You know
topics.
what department they on the city Denver side where they take this out of? Do we know that? Would probably take different digging.
It's in there. I did see it. It was something I think to do with like economic, like helping people economically, like,
Oh,
the housing or something like that. So, they're giving money to Denver Foundation to help. And we'll see actually we'll see that here coming up.
okay.
So before we get to that, though, who are one of the people that the Denver Foundation supports? So this Denver Foundation, everybody's least favorite parental organization here, which is the Colorado Statewide Parent Coalition. So they don't say how much money they gave them this year, but this is part of that $2.5 million. This group's getting a chunk of that money from the Denver Foundation, which is getting paid by the Denver government. And guess who heads this organization, or who's the executive director of this organization, Jessica?
Our my favorite gal, Lorena Garcia, with her giant forehead, which I shouldn't be mean about, but I don't care anymore. Yeah,
Right.
she's so mean, and she's so mean and nasty. And we kept pointing this out to her on Twitter, but like they don't even care that they've been caught in this. Because not only is she receiving a salary, which I'm sure you can go over, I'm just gonna say it, she receives a salary from this position that is all tangled up in all this money, and and she's a legislature. She legislates policy to help give it more funding. It's
a,
uh
a card-carrying
sickening.
member of the Democratic Socialists of America, serving in our state government as the executive director of this parent coalition that gets taxpayer funded, that gets money from this huge, huge billion-dollar organization, the Denver Foundation. I mean, if you really want to look at the motivations or the explanation behind some of the policy we see down at the legislature, it's not too surprising when you start digging in this deep. Tiffany
Everyone
Caldwell
thinks.
was, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Actually, everyone says, "Oh, it's all the corporations and businesses lobbying," and it's like, no, it's mostly this. I mean, obviously, there's that lobbying too, but it's like it's this mostly insular stuff.
Right. And Tiffany Caldwell, I believe, ran for Denver mayor and failed, if I'm not mistaken, or was Denver City Council, but definitely one of those outspoken socialist types down in the city of Denver. So they're getting money from this huge foundation that's connected to all these other organizations. And then we saw Lorena Garcia was on that bill earlier this year for this welcome grant. So, that money's, who knows where that's going to go, right? So you have the legislator getting paid by this getting her organization getting paid by this foundation. And then she sponsors a bill to send more money to this organization that's going to then dole this money out to some other nonprofit. I mean, it's like you can see it. It's like one, two, three. This is how it works, folks.
But it's virtuous when they do it. It's virtuous and good.
That's what they want you to think. Um, this is for this little FFN training is from the it's called a statewide parent coalition website. So they were selected. They were selected by the Colorado Department of Early Childhood to administer this historic program in Colorado. And how much money are they getting? How much of our taxpayer money is this group getting? Well, let's see. Here's the TOPS expenses. So far this year, they've gotten nearly $390,000 in grants to this Colorado statewide parent coalition from our Department of Education, this Department of Early Education, for this grant that they're going. You can see the fiscal note in the bottom. I know it's kind of small, but they had thought it was going to be $7 million back in 2022 to 2023, that fiscal year, and at least 400,000 of it has gone to this Lorena Garcia organization to help train people to be cared, watching kids and stuff like that. So it's just goes to show you these bills get passed, they go to this politically connected organization. Tax money is coming out the wazoo here.
Ugh, it's crazy. It's not even career. You don't even have to be a career politician anymore. You just have to like do what they want for you one time, what for them one time or whatever, and they'll keep your bread buttered.
Yeah, you just got to get in and play the game, and now all of a sudden you have all the checks get written, right?
I'd love to see their bank accounts because they do it sneaky getting to their bank accounts too. So
Oh, no doubt. And so then I thought, well, has the city of Denver supported a Colorado statewide parent coalition? And yes, they have. They have cut them checks. This is just this year, $160,000. So this Lorena Garcia nonprofit, where she makes buku bucks on, is getting money from the city of Denver. It's getting money from the state government. All these other nonprofits connected to this immigration issue and other issues that are totally agenda driven are getting money from these same places. I mean, it's crazy. If you shut
and it
off
doesn't do
the
anything. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't provide a service. It doesn't create a product. It doesn't like do anything. It's just it's not
it's
even it's not even just paperwork. It's just paperwork. That's all it is.
it just pays their bills. That's it. They cash the checks. I mean, that's what the money's going.
Crazy. Who would have thought? I would have never thought. I should have been smart enough to get in on this. No, I would never, but Lord.
So I thought let's go back to the Denver Foundation real quick because they had, with $1.2 billion, they're involved in all of this stuff. So it turns out there was an executive order back in 2017 to create a self and welcoming city for all of Denver's people. And that's what this now infamous Denver Hearts Immigrants banner was up on the city hall there. And they created something called the Denver Immigrant Legal Services Fund. Now, this is different than the Colorado one we've seen that more taxpayers' money going to. Denver also has an Immigrant Legal Services Fund where $2.5 million have been granted to nonprofits to provide direct legal services to 4,200 Denver residents since inception. So this is more taxpayer money going to the Denver Foundation. So I think you asked earlier what that money was going. Well, I think it is actually this Denver Immigrant Legal Services Fund is where the city of Denver's cutting checks to this nonprofit who's then supporting all of these other nonprofits.
Oh yeah. Well, and I also was wondering too what department they pay it from the city of Denver because I've known Do Better's been exposing them that Mike Johnson says his office is they spent the least amount of money. Well, here comes shows. Yeah, he still has staff. They're just paying him out of a different department. So yeah, just beautiful, really.
It's games. It's games they're
So
playing.
that's I'm like I wonder what department it comes out of what they call it, but crazy.
So then, of course, one of the other organizations that the Denver Foundation funds or gives money to is this Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network we saw again. So I just had to bring them back up because they're I mean, it's totally this insular network of nonprofits, of government agencies, and politicians who are perpetuating this crisis in Aurora and across Colorado, and it seems to continue as long as that taxpayer money keeps funneling through.
Good business.
So that's really what I got for now. It was a, a lot digging through all of that stuff. The rabbit hole is so deep and trying to figure out where to go with it all. But I thought this was kind of an interesting topic because I know Jessica, you've been so vocal about this human trafficking issue, and if we can connect it to some of these other non-governmental agencies here in Colorado, then I think it tells this really compelling story.
No, thank you for digging, and hopefully the people who watch this, something will spark their interest, and they'll be able to deep dive a little off of something else. Because that's how I find I've been able finding it. In all our groups of friends, there's always someone who focuses on this and can kind of go off on this trail. So everybody, if there was something that caught your eye, and you're like, you can look it up, and you'll find some dirt probably right away. So it's and the more help we have doing this, the better. Will anything come of it? I don't know. I hope eventually they'll have to change the word nonprofit because nonprofit will be such a disgusting like word, because it's just we could turn it means crook or something, but I don't think that'll happen.
Right. I think a big thing for people is they can look at the Denver government website here, Transparency, and actually see their checkbook. You can go into that website and type in different names of some of these organizations or other organizations you might be curious about and see where, if they've given them money. The other one is the state website, which is the TOPS expenses, link kind of there at the bottom. And you can type in a name of any of these nonprofits or other ones and see all the money they've received. Those are two great tools for people. And then just kind of digging around and starting to see how they all connect and how these same organizations have been playing this game for years, and just money is just gobs and gobs of money is moving through all of this. So I'd love to dig deeper in another day, but I figured this was a kind of a good start for it and very interesting. Of course, I'm still very curious, this Office of New Americans being able to spend millions and millions of dollars when they only receive really $488,000 from the government, where the rest of this money is coming from, who's connected to those nonprofits, those anonymous donors, that's allowing them to create this whole system that we see in play.
Yes. There's always more to find. I'm excited. Are you gonna make this a series?
I'd love
Perhaps?
to, yeah, or expose this establishment, expose these groups. Just going back real quick at the end here, Lorena Garcia there sponsoring that bill where that's going to provide House Bill 1280 that's going to provide at least $2.1 million to a nonprofit, to some grants to community-based organizations, that are all, they're all, it's some of the same people are going to be connected. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. We're just going to see more and more of this until people get upset about it, until people kind of get this information out there and maybe put a stop to it.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, appreciate you, Jessica. Appreciate you taking the time to go over this. Any final thoughts?
No, just everybody dig a little bit and take breaks too. Don't get burned out, but dig in as much as you can because there's a lot to find.
Definitely, that's the truth. Well, thank you, Jessica. Appreciate it, and we'll see you around.
Thank you.